episode of the Business of Aesthetics podcast series, brought to you by our co-sponsors, MRP, Laser of Tech, and Equa Marketing. We also want to thank our silver sponsors, Eile's Works and Pronox. If you would like to network and share your experience with our podcast guests and other aesthetic industry professionals, join our Facebook or LinkedIn communities by searching for Business of Aesthetics. Today we're going to be speaking with one of the finest experts in aesthetics.
Art of influential practice leadership. So that's the topic today, unveiling secrets for growth and engagement. Can you say a couple of words, Michael? I know I'll be introducing you shortly, but you are the one who will be the main presenter. So what are some of the things we'll be covering today?
Hey, Aaron, yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. And thank you for being with us today. We're going to be digging into this whole idea of influential leadership and bringing it to bear on how you engage in and operate your practice with your people and your clients, and really look at some techniques, some secrets as we use for growth and engagement. And we're going to, some of these elements you're going to see are part of a larger mastermind that you'll hear a little bit about later. But I think that's kind of, I was thinking earlier, Naren, I was thinking like influential leadership is kind of like aesthetic beauty. You know, it's it's one part holistic, it's one part transforming. But they have to be, you have to be intentional with it. You have to work at this. And I think that's today what we're going to cover is some of the stuff that just really can transform how you influence in your organization with your team and with your clients.
Thank you. So a little bit about myself. I'm the founder of the Business of Aesthetics community, and many of you in the community kind of were asking about, we always want to, upgrade our skills, our capabilities as practice owners and leaders. Can you help? So we decided to launch in 2024 January a mastermind program. So this mastermind program is a 40-week program. We have a lot more demand than we have supply, so we have created a waiting list. So of course, from the waiting list, we'll handpick the ones who we think will get the most value from this mastermind, and we'll invite them to join. So this will be starting in January. So you will learn more about the mastermind. So as part of the mastermind, this 40-week program, you will get to learn 20 of those 40 weeks are going to be, where you get to solve real problems in your practices, along with the other 20 mastermind members. The other 20 weeks are going to be, you're going to be learning concepts and ideas that will help you transform the way you lead, the way you market, the way you build your practice. So we'll be bringing in experts plus Michael, who will be our facilitator for the whole program. So Michael will be teaching some of the modules. You will have experts teaching some of the modules. And the whole idea is to kind of help you level up, help you create skills or capabilities you don't have today. So in today's presentation, Michael is really focusing on leadership, which is a cornerstone of this mastermind program. Because if you don't grow as a leader, your practice is not going to grow. Michael has more than 35 years of experience as a coach and a professional mediator. He has helped thousands of business owners, practice owners, doctors all across the country. And his focus always has been like, how do you grow? How do you be a great leader, not just for your customers, but also for your team, and even for your own self and your own family. So he has lots of experience and knowledge because he has worked with, thousands of leaders in all types of situations. So hopefully with his experience and knowledge, him being the facilitator of this mastermind program, you will learn, because, the advantage of a program like a mastermind program is it's real life. It's not like a theoretical class where you learn some concepts and then you go home. Rather, you bring your real problems into this group, you discuss as a group, you solve it. And also you bring your objectives into the group. You set targets in this group. And of course, with that 20 sessions of education, you can also now take that education and apply it. So Michael, and also, I'm sure some of you may have heard him in a podcast. He's exceptional. He has so much knowledge and experience in all types of topics to do with leadership and practice development. So I think Michael so far did two podcasts. He'll be doing more podcasts in the Business of Aesthetics podcast show. Team, if you can find the links to the 2 podcasts Michael did, where I was the one interviewing him and he was the one who was, the star of the show, so to speak. That'll be great. So if you haven't listened to it, of course, I strongly recommend you go and check those out. Michael, can you add a couple of words as we move on?
Yeah, I don't think I'm capable of just adding a couple of words now. But it's good. I'll try. I just realized I'm looking at my picture and looking at my picture. I said, I have a little different hairdo these days, don't I? But it's the same guy. Yeah, I'm really excited because I do a lot of work with as a leadership coach. I coach in all industries across from entertainers to sports celebrities to doctors to business owners, small and large. A lot of I just have, and a lot of times what happens is, we get it. We have great coaching, great these one-on-one coaching experience, but the piece that really is challenging is just getting that peer support, that peer input, that small group where we can build a trust foundation where we have an agenda-free space, if you can imagine, that you could actually share from that perspective. And it's a hard place to find. Most of us don't have an agenda-free space anywhere. And if you have a coach, you probably have one. But to have that one with a group of people, just so powerful. So I'm excited about that and being able to introduce it into the aesthetics field with you guys. That'd be awesome. So that kind of, in my background, I worked, as I say, lots of work in the mediation field and conflict management systems. So there's nothing, I don't think there's anything I haven't seen in the world of conflict or some of the challenges that you face. I probably different language, but I've probably seen all the conflicts and challenges. So I think that kind of kicks me off, Naren.
Thank you, Michael. Absolutely. Michael is a treasure, and I have he coaches me on all kinds of topics. So I really appreciate you, Michael, as an expert and as somebody who can help anyone, including me, grow my business to the next level. I mean, we have 250 people, so my challenges are different from a practice maybe with 10 people, but still, I'm sure you've seen these kind of things like over the last 35 years, like thousands of times. And so I'm sure a lot of the things that I have learned from you, Michael, hopefully you can also share with our audience, both today and, in the Mastermind program.
All right. Well, I think I'll get us started, if that makes sense, Naren.
Yes.
Okay. So just to let you know, the chat box is open. We're going to be posing a couple of questions as we go along to you that you can go ahead and drop your comments in there. Or if you have a question as we're going along, you want to even have something now, you can go ahead and drop that in. I know that Naren's team is on that as well. So we'll be grabbing anything from there and they'll let me know and we'll bring it forward. But let's really today is, I think, this idea of looking at trying to look at the whole idea. So I'm just going to move something out of my way here. The whole idea of not letting. Sorry, just give me a second. I can't move that. There we go. Okay. So some of the challenges that happen in practice without influential leadership. Can I just want to throw something out to you? This idea of influence and influential. It's a word that it gets used a lot. It gets used kind of sometimes in a good way and sometimes not so good. But I want you to think about influential leadership from a context that it's beyond what you do and how you do it, but it actually it propels who you are and why you matter, and people want to follow you. People don't have to follow you. They choose to, they want to be part of it. And influential leaders arguably give somebody something they don't even know they need or want. Once they have it, they can't imagine living without it. And whether that is an employee, a team member, or whether it's a customer. And unexpectedly delighting a customer, of course, is awesome. And that's what influential leadership helps us do. But the things that we see that when there isn't that kind of culture, is we'll see stagnant growth. We'll see growth that just, it's not a flat line, is a down line, as you know, and we don't get the new development of clients. The team becomes fragmented. They become what happens a lot is we see internal conflicts start to come up, and we see an escalation of it's just sometimes it's the smallest thing. It's just somebody not making the coffee that starts to create a culture shift, and hence the picture we're using. It's the idea of patient engagement. You see that we're focusing more on what we do and how we do it, and losing sight of that relationship with the patient, or the patient. We may not be doing that, but that's what the patient's feeling or experiencing, and we need to step into that. We see operational inefficiencies just start to. People are not being as efficient in their time, arguably their talent, and how they're utilizing the resources of the organization. And finally, employee engagement and retention. Employment recruitment is a challenge these days. I know in pretty much every field. I know yours for sure. But engaging, keeping them engaged and retained. And engagement's not about. It's very often it is about money, but mostly it's about being valued and heard. Mostly it's about having participating in the vision for the organization, and we'll talk a bit about that as we go forward. So those are just kind of the things that just to highlight this. If you don't have this kind of influential practice leadership, you're probably going to see some of that happening, or it's starting to happen, and it has potential to escalate. So we're going to cover today a few things. We're going to cover the 4 leadership styles. We'll unpack those for you today, what those look like, and we're going to have a chance to see how they apply in your particular field. The 5 levels of leadership, which talks about just where we lead from, relevant to our role, our capacity of it in the role, and our level of influence. We're also going to talk about defining influential leadership styles and what does that look like. We're going to look at change. I always say years ago, I remember being told, you've probably heard this, we were told there's 2 things that are in life that are inevitable and unavoidable: death and taxes. And which is true. However, it's not true. There's actually 4 things that are inevitable and unavoidable: death, taxes, change, and conflict. But the latter 2 don't have to be deadly and costly. They are something that we can actually work through. But with 70% of change failing in organizations, there's a reason, and it's usually because the leadership hasn't got the capacity, the influence to actually help facilitate that change and help walk it through. And we're going to unpack a little bit of that today. That's a whole mastermind session, one of my favorites on change. And then influential leadership means, how do you keep this? If you start to do something, it's one thing to take a small step, but it's to keep moving forward, not to accelerate, but to create momentum. And that's always challenging with the schedule and the work and all the things going on, everybody's time. So we're talking a bit about that. So that's kind of where we're going to go today. Those are the things I'd like to tonight that we're going to cover. This graph that you see in front of you this is kind of, we're going to end up filling a little of this in by the time we're finished here. But I just want to give you a picture of this. So we do a lot of work in the mastermind with dashboards. So the idea of something visual, like something you can measure, something you can see, because often we argue that, well, you can't measure relationship stuff, but you can measure your EBITDA, your percent, you can measure your ROI, you can measure your KPIs, you can do all those kind of things. You measure how much of this and that you did, your time, and all those. But we tend to and that's what we tend to focus on, is those tangible structural levels of growth. But without people, those levels of growth become problematic. So we need to, how do we measure this is where some of the dashboards we actually are able to use, like this one, where we can start to measure where you're at relationally as a leader and where you'd like to be. But I'm getting ahead of myself there, but I just want you to have a look at that picture. We'll come back to it and have a chance to do some work with that. So, but I want to start out with this idea of the 5 levels of leadership. Naren said something that was really important. It's about, he was talking about the work I'm doing with him and growing yourself. He says growing up. It's not growing up from a maturity standpoint. It's growing up in your organization. There's different laws of leadership. One of the laws is a law of the lid. That an organization will never be able to grow above the level of the leader. Everything will bump up against that until you raise the lid, until you raise the level of the leader. That's what we're talking about here tonight. That's also what Mastermind's all about doing, is raising that level, creating a higher level that everybody can work up to. Often why great people leave is because they're bumping into that level, that top of the lid, and they go elsewhere where they have capacity to grow. So these are the 5 levels. Well, they're going to talk about them in a few minutes, but position, permission, production, people development, and pinnacle. And we're going to unpack that a little bit as we go forward. But I want to start with talking about the leadership styles. The difference between the levels and the styles is the levels is a progressive journey of leadership. The styles are all applicable and interactive at different points in time in your day-to-day leadership life. And so we're going to unpack those because that's where we really get into some of the uniqueness of what we're talking about. The first one is dictatorial. And dictatorial leadership is really about it's about just simply directing traffic. There's limited participation. I always use the analogy, if you go to war, you're in a battle, you got your soldiers, you're all trained, everybody's ready to go. That's awesome. And there's not really a time to say, we should have a focus group. Let's just have brainstorm this a bit. No, we need to get out, we know what we need to do. We need to execute. Let's just get this done. And so dictatorial looks very much like that. Then the next style is authoritative, and authoritative is really driven by structure. So following the manual, following the procedures, following the details. We have an authoritative structure, obviously in professional medical practices that are critical to the health and well-being and the legal aspects of the processes. So authoritative is very much, it's not, there's input from people, but it's input as it relates to the structure. If that makes sense. And then there's consultative, and consultative really is where we're inviting feedback, inviting input from either internally or externally in terms of the process. And this is the one that where stuff starts to go a little off track, because sometimes we feel that because we're consulting someone, we have to agree with them, where we don't. We just need to validate their opinion, but we don't necessarily have to do what they say. But it's about giving. Again, number one reason people leave organizations is because they don't feel valued and heard. A consultative process is an intentional step into that valued and heard exercise. And then the last one is participatory. And that one is really where we're really engaging people. When I was talking about that law, that if somebody feels that they're not part of the vision, they're not part of the mission, if they don't feel that they have a quote unquote a place in the sun, then they start to look at, well, where do I go? Who am I? And as a leader that, I always say vision leaks every 30 days, and it's so critical. But participatory leadership requires a very strong, influential leader to constantly lead, not just what you do and how you do it, but who you are and why you matter as an organization, as individuals, and as individuals together. So those are those four styles. And if you look at those right now, you probably can say to yourself, okay, I can see myself, I generally land here. Like I'm probably more consultative, or I'm dictatorial, I'm participatory. And we all have a dominant style, just like we have a preferred personality type. We do a lot of cognitive work in the mastermind with personality types and appreciation language and social styles and things like that. But specifically here, you probably have a default setting. You're more often or more likely to use one of these styles as your go-to style. Sometimes that means that you're probably using it where it's not necessarily the best choice, and therefore can be a reflection on how people are going to choose to follow you or not. So that, just to sort of think that through, just right now as you're looking at that, where do you see yourself? What do you look at? You say, okay, I think I see myself in there. I'm consultative. That's interesting. Just take a note of that. You'll see why when we move along a little further. So let's just talk a little bit about the styles in practices. And I think that we've just highlighted a couple of things. Obviously, quick decisions in emergencies. An obvious setting for that. I'm sure you'd have others. Ideas you might have, you can throw up in the chat. What other good examples are there of a dictatorial style application in your practices? Authoritative style, confident direction for treatments. I know as a patient, I like when I see the doctor pull up a sheet and there's here's the things we're going to do, and it gives me some sense of confidence, comfort, and being able to understand the process to the extent that I need to. But where else do you see it being a useful style? The authoritative style, the confidence, it builds confidence, it demonstrates confidence. It also gives clarity to treatments. It's also great for cost management and all those things as well. Consultative style. So collaborative treatment planning. I think this is something I've seen. As a matter of fact, I just was at my dentist today, and I don't do well at the dentist. I'll just go ahead and admit that. But today I was part of the planning. Dr. Alex, he was great. They were saying, Mike, there's a crown cracked and there's a couple other things, and there's a little bit of surgery stuff, and it was but I participated in the planning. So we're going to do this. Are you okay? We'll do this. And I don't know that there was no really, they didn't need me to be doing it, but what they did is they made me feel that I was collaborated. I felt, and it for me as a patient, it put me at ease, took some of the anxiety I was feeling. I'm like one of those white coat syndrome patients, and it was actually a great experience today. Participatory style. Empowering team creativity for innovative treatments. You could also put in that sentence, empowering team creativity for innovative treatments and identifying value-added opportunities that would benefit the client. This is where creativity is the key here. That's the key word. If an organization that has high creativity, then you'll find that what they do and how they do it and who they are and why they matter work really well together. If there's low creativity, then usually the transactional space, what they do and how they do it, drives the organization, and they just pay lip service to the relational side, which is who we are and why we matter. And there's usually a lot of conflict instead of creativity. We dig into that big time in Mastermind and really understanding how to use those three spaces, transactional, relational, and the creative space, as to pull pull the conflict space out, replace it with that creative space. Super powerful in organizations. When you talk about all those things that we see in limiting with the employee engagement, super powerful when you can actually operate with the three spaces in an effective way in an organization. So just some thoughts. If you've got any thoughts in chat, throw them in there, just what you think, where else you could see one of those styles working within your practice. So we've kind of covered this. So just give me a sec. Close that screen. As you say, the dictatorial, urgent patient needs, consistent patient experiences for the authoritative, the consultative and custom treatment planning, and finally participatory to innovate for patient satisfaction. Again, we're not. If we wanted to really, if we were doing this as a group, like we're doing this as a master, we'd unpack this and we'd talk about how have we seen it, where have we seen it working well, where have we not seen it not working well, what could we do differently, how could we do that together, how could we do some peer-to-peer work on coming up with best practices. So that's again, I just want to really touch on this. I don't want to dig too far in it because really need to honor our time tonight. So here's a question for you. What's your go-to leadership style in your aesthetic practice? I was kind of asking that before. So think about it. What is your go-to leadership style? And I'd like you to think about an example where it's been effective. So think about right now that whatever style it is, remember all four styles are applicable and useful at different times, but when have you used one of those styles really well? I'd love you to share that in the chat. I would really appreciate that. Just give us some feedback. But I'd like you to think about this, though, at the same time, where it's been effective, but also, have you noticed the times where that style is your go-to style, where you've seen it not be too successful, where it seems to almost feel like it's like a dull thud in the organization, if you will? I mean, I know I have. I know for myself, I'm very much a participatory leader until I am not. And usually when I'm not, and I get, if I sense things are going too far off the rails, or I'm getting uncomfortable, where I'm letting my emotions drive the bus as opposed to being just a warning system, I start to move to a dictatorial style. And I always used it. There was a Norman Schwarzkopf, who was one of the military leaders from the war in Iraq, and he talked about. He says, when we went to war, I was a dictatorial leader. I had to drive agendas, had to drive. But after the war, I would go back and I'd spend time with the troops and I'd cast vision and kind of unpack why we did what we did and where we were going. And people used to think I was politicking, but really all I was doing was reconnecting myself to the relationships of the team after a time under pressure. And a lot of organizations don't do that. They just sort of hope it's got this thing, I like this. The sleeping dogs lie, just let them leave things alone. Time heals all wounds. And neither of those are true. People need to have a communication process after you've gone off the rails a bit as a leader. So just that's a little sidebar. So I'd love to put some thoughts in there in the chat. Let's go ahead and talk a bit about these progression through the 5 levels of leadership. So as I said, the first one, we talk about people follow you because they have to. That's because you got the position. I mean, you could say that if you own your practice, people follow you because they have to, because you own the practice. You hired them. They have a job. It's arguably, that's an entry level and it requires little work. A positional leader will not really, if you stay as a positional leader, then those 5 challenges we identified at the front end of this will constantly be on your radar, because this level doesn't generate a few things. It doesn't generate any capacity for people to trust you. It doesn't generate any space for healthy conflict where you could passionately disagree without taking it personally. It doesn't build any opportunity for change and empowerment of change. And it doesn't build any opportunity for people to feel that you're doing something for them, but you're also doing something for others. And that's where we move to the next step, where people follow you because they want to, the permission side. They basically give you permission to lead them. Now, arguably, you'd say, well, I hired them, of course. Yeah, and I agree. But that's that transactional relational space I was talking about. Just you hired them and it's on paper, but relationally, they have to feel that I want to follow you. I give you permission to lead. What's happening there is you're developing relationships and leading by example. People see that in you. They see how you lead. If you're inconsistent with that, if it's very much all over the place, then it's going to be hard to follow. I always like, as Mark Twain said, if you think you're a leader, every once in a while you should look behind you and see if anybody's following you. This would be a good place to do that. And we actually dig into, how do you measure that? How do you know how you're growing? And that's part of this graph that we were just showing you earlier. We'll get to that. But from here, we go, people follow you because they want to people follow you because of what you've done for the organization. It's one thing to own the company or be the office manager or to be the team leader or whatever. But what have you done for the organization? How have you, the word I like here is inculcate, or how have you infused yourself into the vision and the passion for the organization, and in a way that it's not you trying to promote it, it's just you're creating this attraction. People want to be part of this. You think of some of you think of people that you would look up to as leaders in your journey yourself in the past. Think of the characteristics, the traits that you could identify with it. Yeah, I like that. I get that. That's what I was looking for. You'll find that it's because of what they've done for the organization. It's not just about what they're doing in their job now, in their position, or what they're just doing for you. That there's something bigger here. You're now making a difference in the business, and your leadership style is getting results. Now, I stop and think about that for a second. Is your leadership style getting you results? It's a great question. If it's not, why? And then a deeper question would be, what do you mean by getting results? So that's a great question too. Not just results that we're getting higher productivity off our people, or more average revenue per hour, or whatever that looks like. But our people are more engaged, more happy. That they're referring their friends. Where our length of employment is increasing. You know, often we tend to think of results more in that transactional channel as opposed to the relational. But that takes us to next, from people follow you because of what you've done for the organization, to people follow you because of what you have done for them personally, and how you've built up trust and respect as a leader. You're now developing future leaders in the business. This is where you move from being arguably from a leader to a leader/coach. This is where you really begin to mentor people. This is where people come to you and ask questions, not questions. They're not asking the same question 30 times anymore. They're asking questions that are innovative or expansive, or questions that are about the future, or questions about opportunity that they looked at. It's about this idea that they trust you enough that and respect you as a leader, that they can ask you something that perhaps early on in the position level, if they'd asked you, they would have been afraid of losing their job, or they wouldn't know how it would land, or they think they might be thought of less than. But now they see the value of you beyond what you do and how you do it. They see the value of you in terms of who you are and why you matter. And then that takes us to the highest level, which is the pinnacle level, appropriately named. People follow you because of who you are and what you represent. I'll just stop and think about that. If I asked you, if you think about a global leader, national, in any format, business or social or spiritual or whatever element you want to look at, can you think of a leader that you'd say that is a pinnacle leader? Like for me, if I was to describe that, for me, a pinnacle leader would be Nelson Mandela. Another one would be Mother Teresa. Another one would be Martin Luther King. And because who they are and what they represent, they built characters and strength that there was something that was beyond not just what they did and how they did it. It was who they are, and I wanted to be part of it. They cast a vision that was compelling enough, and their strengths were strong enough that I felt confident enough that I could walk with them and journey with them. And I wasn't just being told what to do. I wasn't just being asked a little bit on how to do something. I felt that I had a role in the organization that gave me the capacity to be present and part of the future. Now, if you're a busy practice and time is already a huge issue, you're saying, Walker, that is crazy talk. Who has time for that? And I'm not going to argue with you, but disagree. You're right. It does take time to actually operate a bit. But here's the cool thing: is that we don't all need to be pinnacle leaders. You get to choose that. I'm going to show you what I mean by that. You can choose what is your level of leadership. But the key is, and I think that's what I was saying earlier, that like if influential leadership has to be intentional, it has to be something you're doing, and it has to be something you're doing as a practice, just like you do in your business practice. It's not something you just sort of do when time is available. It has to be. It's like brushing your teeth in the morning. It's something we do ideally every day in the morning. So I just want you. I don't want you to get shut down on me because, well, that's just too out there. You don't have to be out there. It's a question where what we're going to focus on is very practical and very actionable with a step that you could take tonight. So let's just look at that graph again. So now you see on the vertical axis the 5 levels of leadership. You can see them there. And then you see on the horizontal axis the 4 leadership styles. Now I could ask you right now, if I said to you, could you map yourself onto this graph where you feel you are right now in terms of influential leadership? keeping in mind this in our model, this represents a benchmark for us to look at what an influential leader is. We have other tools that support this, but so if you said, okay, if you look at yourself on that vertical axis, where do you see yourself right now in the organization, and put a line there, and then you drew a line, moved across on the horizontal to where you saw yourself. So for instance, I saw myself as a production level of leadership, and I'm predominantly consultative. Bang, there's my dot right on the graph. Now, if you've just done that in your own mind, which most of you have, if you haven't, that's okay. We're not asking you to do that, but this is something you can do in your own time. You'll have a video of this, or a recording of this. So, but I think that all of a sudden that's a bit of a game changer, because we've just now made your leadership not just a concept or something that happens in the organization. It's a real thing. It's a dot on a map. Here's the interesting thing: is all your team leaders, all your direct reports, arguably every member of the team has their own dot on this.
Let me ask you a question, Michael. I know one of the benefits that I get from masterminds that I've participated in the past is it's a way to not only solve my challenges and go after my goals. Like, let's say I want to, grow the business by a certain percentage. That's one of the things I use a mastermind for. The other thing I do it is like use it for is like, when I was running a smaller team, I had only certain skills. For me to now run a team that's 3 times bigger, I need to grow. I need to develop my skills. Like, for example, I love this, this conversation around different styles and different levels of leadership. And I love your comments around, where are you today versus where you want to be, right? And of course, in some situations, maybe participatory is better than authoritative, but in other situations, maybe dictatorial is the best way to do things. So knowing like what leadership style you're going to use and when you're going to use it. So these are things that we grow into, right? None of us are born leaders. At least we don't understand all these different methods. Rather, we learn and we apply them. So I'm going to throw a practical question that came from one of our audience. This particular person is struggling with a particular leadership style. This particular person says, he is dictatorial. Like, he tends to be, like, this is the way, we all have to do the way I want it to be done. But unfortunately, when it comes to patient experience, that doesn't seem to work, because, you can't like memorize a script and provide a great experience. It has to be like, genuine and authentic and, coming from the heart, and people have to feel it. So this person is struggling with it. And I guess this person's question is, if I'm in the mastermind, how would you help me kind of deal with this challenge?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is exactly what we find once we start doing once we initially, like for instance, the mastermind, we do some groundwork, some of this kind of stuff. We do some diagnostics, if you will, get some bearings and kind of where people are at. And all of a sudden, just like we did there, suddenly you have a dot on a map here. You go, oh my goodness, I think that's me. And it's sometimes it's a little startling. Sometimes it's really powerful and comfortable and exciting. Wow, I can't, geez, because you can just look at that dot and think, well, where would I like to take it? Or you can look at the other one and say, I'm not where I thought I would be. But this is not, to your point, leadership is one part art and one part science. I think it's the same really as the aesthetics industry in that sense. It's that idea that, there's theory and stuff that we do as leaders, and you can read all the books you want, all that structure, but the art of leadership is really the art of relationships. And it's the relationships that are the challenge. So the individual who's struggling, that they find that their go-to style of dictatorial seems to be working against them in terms of building healthy relationships, empowered, engaged relationships with clients is probably in this scenario you're talking about. I would guess, unless that person has all dictatorial people in the organization, then the same thing will be happening with some of the staff. And if it was all dictatorial people, then that's I won't go I won't go down that rabbit trail. But it's this idea that so now we just need to say, okay, so what is it that works well for you in that style? When you use it and it's working well, why? And what is the win that comes out of that? I mean, what is successful for you? What's working? So well, it works because when I do use that style, I feel we got something done. I feel more confident. I'm still in control. I said, okay, so is that what is that as leadership? Is that what you want to lead by, from a place of control, a place of just being task driven? No, I mean, I care about my people. I said, I know you do. And the reason you have this conflict with yourself with this style is because you don't know how to pull it back. So why don't we try and look at something we call unconditional curiosity? They're going to say, what's that? And I'd say, well, I want you to think of curiosity from the perspective, and this is a whole session we do in the mastermind on unconditional curiosity. It's just a ton of fun, a little challenging, but unconditional curiosity is curiosity without any opinion, expectation, and judgment, starting with yourself. And this is where it gets interesting, because really we start to look at, so why do I think I have to have this dictatorial style? Why? Well, we start to get honest with ourselves. We start to look more at ourselves. We realize there's things that we're doing that are built out of patterns and habits. Often they are driven by strengths out of balances, meaning that we're letting something dominate us that is a strength normally, but it's become so dominant it's out of balance. It also could be from past experience. Sometimes we're letting, as I say, emotions are an early warning system. They were in my book, they were never given a driver's license, but I know I gave mine emotions driver's license a few times. But it's sometimes we just get these things out of balance. So we just look at bringing all that back into it's not about a corrective action. It's not about a structural change. It's about a reflection of what is working and what's not. To sum it up, Naren, is if you think about, if I look at that person where they're at right now, and just imagine that there's a set of studio lights on them as a person, and that's how they see themselves. And through this process, we move those lights to a different angle. Suddenly they see a different perspective of themselves they've never seen before. And they go, that's what I'm looking for. That's it there.
Yeah,
Now think about doing that and multiplying that in a peer setting where there's trust. It's awesome.
Exactly. And also the other participants can also learn something from that, right? Because I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who put up their hands and say, oh, that's me too. Like I tend to be dictatorial, and so it's a wonderful way to both learn from your peers, because or they might jump in and say, hey, I still use it in certain situations, but this is where I fall flat with the dictatorial style. So yeah, I mean, I've seen you lead these types of group conversations, and I think it's magical when you have like people who all have a similar goal, which is to make their practice better than it used to be the prior year, make it successful. But they all are dealing with different perspectives, different challenges, so they all can learn from each other. So that's, I think, one of the magic of a group mastermind setting, as opposed to like individual one-on-one conversations.
Absolutely. We don't, we all like to go, like we just go, okay, we're here and I want to go there, and that's great, but there's a journey. We spent a lot of years getting where we're at. It takes a little time to undo it, but the best part is it doesn't take much to create momentum. Right. The challenge then is to keep the energy focused on that momentum and keep pushing it forward. And what most people do when they start to experience growth and change, when I'm talking about somebody today suddenly gets a light goes on and go, that's powerful. The reality of what happens is they park it. And it's about how do we maintain that? And that's the reason with the mastermind is that we know that if you can spend a year with us and we work through all these things, at the end of the year, it's no longer, and it's not a matter of a if thing anymore. It's just a when thing. It becomes part of your DNA, so to speak. So I know we need to move on here. So I want to just you to think a bit about the benefits here that we see. And we've talked a lot about the elements here, but let me just throw this out. Flexibility. And you think about flexibility. the flexibility, not just with your processes are very structured and very organized, and for good reason, and for the right reasons. But flexibility in how you look at the processes, how you interact with the people, how you engage people, how the next one, innovation, that's the one, like people thinking outside the box, where we're in an organization where there's healthy change going on, where people feel empowered, where the leader is somebody that people want to follow, they don't have to follow, they get to follow. Innovation starts to emerge. We get better decision making. People are starting to think on their own. As I say, we stop being parents to our employees, and I'm not saying that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not particularly healthy if you're trying to empower and engage your team. That's a whole other story. If you end up in the mastermind with me, remind me to tell you the story about Johnny, and that will all come home for you. Increased productivity goes without saying. Productivity, not just in the performance, but in the people, in terms of how they value themselves and each other. And that obviously speaks to engagement and retention. Who wants to leave a great company like that? And then ultimately, a remarkable patient experience. I always say it's easy to meet somebody's needs. It takes a little bit of work to exceed their needs, but to actually create an unexpected outcome, to unexpectedly delight a client, and they can't wait to tell their friends this is where you need to come. That's what we're all looking for. And it's not just about the money. It's not about making having more. It's about actually making that kind of a difference in somebody's life feel so good. And I know that is important to you guys. So we talk about 5 traits of an influential leader. And I just want you to just look at this visually, just resilience, and the whole idea of just being able to, there's always a challenge, always a struggle, but you keep coming back. Emotional intelligence, I've been talking about that. We focus on that in the mastermind. We look at that in a very comprehensive way, but in a very simplistic way. We're not trying to turn it into we need to understand the science, but we have to be able to apply it as an art. Communication skills, huge. And that we spend a lot of time. One of the things that a lot of people struggle with is just how to enter into and engage and work through difficult conversations. I know in peer groups, work in their masterminds in the past, that is a common focus, that when each participant of the 20 people get a session where we're focusing on their things and digging into things. Often this is an area that comes up for work on and investment in. Creativity, this idea, how do you shift from conflict to creativity, and how do you empower that? And then adaptability. This, even though we're in a very structured industry with a lot of guidelines and rules, but we can still be adaptable, and it's the adaptability within the scope of the people and how they are applying those other traits inside the organization. So embracing change in your practice. I'm just going to touch on this, as this is a separate I mentioned in the mastermind, we go into pretty deep into this. But can you think of a time when your adaptability resulted in a positive change in your practice? So just sort of think about, there's a time where something's come up, and just think about that. Make a note of that. But I want to just really jump into quickly. We got just a few minutes left here, but I want you to think about change versus transition. Think about change is inevitable, but transition is a decision. Change is transactional and transition is relational, huge. Change is external and transition is internal. I'm not going to unpack that, but just that middle one is critical. Most of us look at change transactionally, and that's why 70% of it fails. If we can make that transition to look at it holistically, with transition being relational, it's a game changer. How you do that? Well, join us in the mastermind. We'll dig into that. But just to give you an idea quickly, there's 3 stages of change. People, there's this first piece, the light blue, where it's ending, losing, letting go. As people go through that, you'll see there's a group of people that takes a while, but they eventually get through. Then there's a middle group that they have to ask a lot of questions. They have to go. So one size does not fit all. We got to go through a lot of stuff to get there, but we get them through. And then ultimately at the top, we have the new beginning. Very few people represent that. They just, initially it's a small group. They're just, let's just go, let's just run. There's only a small group. If you're the leader like that and you're the new beginning, then you're going to end up losing a lot of people in the other, because you're not, you're way ahead of them. And without unpacking that any further, a whole different way of thinking of change in an organization. And it all starts and hinges on relationships. So this just posing a question, which of those, quickly look at that picture and say, which of those traits is most valuable for you when you think about navigating change? And if you, whichever one you pick, I encourage you to write down 3 things of why. And that is the starting point for how you share change in your organization, because that will be you telling something that people can build on and actually understand the process. So, blind spots, regular self-assessment, seek feedback, embrace continuous learning, engage in peer collaboration, cultivate emotional intelligence, and practice unconditional curiosity. I introduced that to you tonight. And that is really, when you think of that, you mapped yourself somewhere here. We'll just say if that's where you are now. And you think, okay, so where would I like to be? That's where I desire to be there. And it's not, we don't have to look at the whole thing. All we have to do is figure out, how do we close the gap? Arguably one day at a time. How do we close the gap? Well, that's what all of this is about. That's what the mastermind's about. How do we close the gap in what you want for yourself as an influential leader, how you want to be seen, how you want to present yourself, how you want others to work with you. And we just, in closing, and just reflect on this journey, just to think about which traits, as I've mentioned, really resonate with you in your current practice. Think about those. I encourage you to ask a couple of your, if you've got peers, senior people, or leadership team, ask them what they think. Which of those traits are yours, and then what areas do you envision further growth and development, and then don't try and map out 20 things. Just pick something, 1 or 2 things, just something small. I encourage you to pick something so small that you could actually start it tonight. Might be an email to someone, or a call, or whatever that is. But remember, this is a journey. This is not a destination. You will never arrive at quote unquote leadership. Leadership will be the journey in how you become the best version of yourself that people get to follow, and help you be who you are and why you matter in the way that you always envisioned yourself being. And I'm going to stop there, Naren, and turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Can you go to the next slide, Micah?
Yep.
I know several of you have sent in questions about the mastermind programs, so I thought, we can answer those questions right now. So this mastermind starts in January. It's going to be on Mondays, and it's going to be 1 hour long, and it's going to be 40 sessions, 40 sessions, spread throughout the year. We, of course, take breaks during the summer and Thanksgiving and Christmas and so forth. So it's spread out over 40 weeks in 2024. And there's quite a few people who are interested. So we decided to create a wait list. That way we get to, review the people who are interested, look at their backgrounds, look at their goals, and see if it's a good fit. Because it's the very first inaugural program, we are calling these members founding members. And the regular fee for this program is $1,500 a month. But for the founding members, the first 20, we are offering it for $499 a month, or $4,990 a year. So we are pretty much providing a 66% discount or savings. So and the other thing we are doing is we are offering this price for a 3-year period. So if you do want to continue, as your business continues to grow and you still want to benefit from the mastermind setting, then of course you can keep that low fee for 3 years. It's only for the first 20. Of course, beyond the first 20, our price will go up. It's just, we want to do something special. So if you're interested, we'll put a link, sign up for the wait list. The way the process works is we'll go through the wait list. We'll look at your, look at your application and then decide if you'll be a good fit. If you're a good fit, then we'll invite you to join the mastermind group starting in 2024. So that's kind of in a nutshell, what we are doing and how we are doing it. Let me see if there's any other questions from the audience. Little confused as how I would find out the level of leadership I'm at.
That's a great question. And it's not easily, if you think about there isn't an answer. There's not a book answer. There's a heart answer, but part of that answer, it would be, if I asked whoever asked that question, if I asked you, if you approach 2 or 3 people with this model and those elements we were talking about, said, where do you see me as a leader? You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised that either there's a consistency about where people see you, that is where you thought you were, or it's somewhere else, which is actually more often. It's when we do 360 surveys, we see that. And sometimes it's all over the place. That's the starting point. If that's a question, then inviting people closest to me to just give me some feedback on what they think. And then there's just a super powerful question that comes in behind that is to each of them. So why that? And at that point, now you start to see yourself, okay, I think then based on what I've heard, this is where I'm at. Where do I want to go? How do I want to close that gap? How do I move forward? And that's part of our mastermind journey, is to do exactly that.
Absolutely. There's another question about the mastermind program, and the question is, what else is there outside of this 1-hour sessions over a 40-week period? So there's going to be 20 sessions out of the 40 sessions that are going to be problem solving. So literally like a typical mastermind, where those in the group bring their challenges as it pertains to what they just learned last week. So there'll be like learning, application. So let's say they learn about leadership. They would bring challenges related to leadership, and they'll talk about those challenges. And as a group, they'll troubleshoot, they'll solve problems, they'll make decisions. And of course, there's going to be a Slack group. So, throughout the week, you can, help each other. You can ask questions of each other, of course, of Michael as well, as you're dealing with things. You could even ask for referrals. You could say, hey, I'm looking for XYZ. Is anyone in the group have any recommendation for this particular service that I'm looking for? Hey, I'm struggling with getting Google reviews. Anyone in the group has any success getting Google reviews? So it's a great community of people who are trying to do similar things. Of course, everyone building an aesthetic practice, and together, the idea is that you're going to be stronger than trying to do it on your own. So that's another question that was shared. So join the waitlist. We will definitely take a look at your application, and if you think you would benefit the most from this group, then of course we will invite you to join. The reason we wanted to do it this way is, definitely there's going to be like 4 people for every one we let in. So we just want to make sure we are giving the right people the opportunity to do this, inaugural group.
Naren, can I just add to that? When you're talking about issues and problem solving, one of the power tools is that we're going to be dealing with stuff in real time. So people have an issue they have to deal with, like within days, maybe a week or something like that. That's one of those things. This is not a history lesson. It's about real time unpacking of particular issues. And that is probably one of the things that people commonly say. Again, I mentioned that before, this idea that having an agenda-free space that you can trust 19 other people, well, 20 including me, to just actually share that and and feel confident and empowered to have a solution you wouldn't have got otherwise.
Michael is really has so much experience and knowledge when it comes to leadership, when it comes to conflict resolution, when it comes to teams. So I think you will get a lot by watching this video again and share it with your team. And of course, if you're interested in joining the mastermind group, we would love to have you. So once you sign up for the waiting list, within a few days, you'll hear from us if you've been selected. And if you were selected, then of course, we would see you in January.
Thanks, man. Pleasure being with everybody. Looking forward to seeing some of you at the mastermind and our next webinar.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Business of Aesthetics podcast series, brought to you by our co-sponsors MRP, Laser Uptech, and Equa Marketing, and silver sponsors Lengia Law, Eilis Works, and Pronox. Would you like to join our growing group of aesthetic industry experts and get featured on the Business of Aesthetics podcast? Or do you know someone who would love to share their strategies for growth in the aesthetics business, providing quality patient care or their clinical expertise? Head on over to www.businessofaesthetics.org/podcast/show and apply to be featured as a guest on the show. Remember to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen. If you would like to engage with today's or any of our past speakers, join our Facebook group or LinkedIn group by searching for Business of Aesthetics. Thank you and have a great day.